Welcome back to For St. Pete's Sake, the podcast where we deep dive into everything political in Pinellas County and beyond. We're sponsored by the Stonewall Democrats of Pinellas County, and we're here to bring you real conversations about real change. I'm Christian, president of the Stonewall Dems, and I'm joined as always by my amazing co-host and vice president, Laura Gherkin.
Hello, welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us once again. I'm really excited because we have another really special guest here today. She is, in our eyes, a rising star here in Pinellas, and she's using her voice to generate real change across the country. Today, we're going to have an interview with Sabrina Bousbar. She's going to talk to us about her time as a candidate for Congressional District 13, which was here in Pinellas County, which she ran in the primary in 2024. Yeah, 2024. And then did not win in the primary, but she's going to talk about how that process was. So one of the things that I did want to go into real quick that before we get into is a little thing called Citizens United. It was a court case back from 2010 with a group called Citizens United that wanted to release a political movie criticizing, guess who? Nobody else but Hillary Clinton just before the 2010 election. There was a law back then that said how much corporations and organizations could spend on political ads in a certain amount of time before the campaign or before an election. So Citizens United, the group, sued the government and saying that that law violated their First Amendment right to free speech. So what eventually happened is that the Supreme Court ruled that not only the Supreme Court went above and beyond, honestly, in their decision. They didn't have to do this. They could have just said, yes, it is free speech. You can do that. But they also decided that corporations and other groups can spend unlimited money on political ads as long as they do it independently, which means they're not giving it to the candidate directly. And that businesses, corporations spending money on political messages is a form of free speech. So, yeah, that is what has led to a lot of the increase in political spending that we see and on ads and whatnot, and which leads us to our conversation here with Sabrina and the costs of what it's like to run a campaign. So, welcome, Sabrina. Thank you for sitting through that long intro, and I'll give you a chance to say hi and introduce yourself. Just give us a quick background about yourself.
Of course. Hi, everyone. Sabrina Bousbar. Super happy to be here and speaking with you all. So a little bit about myself. I am a native, born and raised here in Pinellas County, Florida. My parents came to the country about 34 years ago. So my dad's Moroccan, my mom's Colombian. So I grew up in a different kind of household than your normal American household, but always was, told how amazing America was, that you have the ability to stand up for what you believe in, show up for your communities, that you have your rights and liberties. And so I've always been so patriotic about this country. And when I was in college, I learned quickly where our political dynamics were going, especially when we elected President Donald Trump. And so that was a pivotal time in my life where I decided I was not doing enough. And so I got involved. I worked at the DNC as an intern. That was like my first step into politics. And then after I graduated, became an organizer. So I organized across the country for President Biden, got him elected, and then was in his administration where I took on COVID response. Worked a lot at the Department of Health and Human Services. So thank you to anyone who's been laid off for your service. I'm so sorry that has happened. Sure. Awful. But worked there for a bit, and then also at the White House doing strategic outreach. And then decided to run for office myself. So I guess that we're going to lean into that a little bit here because it's obviously for Pinellas County, but I was really upset with our current representative, Anna Paulina Luna, who is anti-abortion rights, anti-immigration rights, like anything that is pro-democracy, even though they try to, misconstrue that to be anti-democracy, but it's actually pro-democracy. And I just was like, I've had enough. Like, we need to step up. We need to get people running for office, especially in the state of Florida, to challenge, our representatives who are not fighting for us and fighting for our futures. And so that's what pushed me to jump into the primary. So I entered a primary with two other candidates that eventually ended up being five total. Came in second and, really was able to raise and build a community and an organizing structure. And even was endorsed by the Stonewall Dems and the LGBT
Here.
them, so shout out. Um, and yeah, that's what really brought me to that moment. I did work for Harris campaign post the election. I just could not sit on the sidelines. So I went to Pennsylvania and was a deputy organizing director there. Saw firsthand what the battleground states were like. And then after that, really just took a break. Currently work for the ACLU now doing organizing, but I'm here on my personal capacity to talk about Pinellas County. But yeah, that's just overall who I am and what I've done.
That's awesome. And I totally forgot that you were in Pennsylvania for the Harris campaign. So that'll be interesting again, leaning into because that was our ground zero for entrance of Elon Musk and his money into politics. So I guess that would really be my first place to start as, with the Citizens United campaign decision, which said all campaign, any corporation spending is unlimited. It also, they've also, I think, adjusted the caps on how much individual donors can give to increase it and whatnot. How did that affect your campaign as far as fundraising and outside spending?
Yeah, so it creates a lot of loopholes, right? So something that Laura mentioned that's very like what we need to understand is it also said that you can't give to the actual candidate, but you can give towards political messaging, right? So what happens is the FEC has guidelines where you as a candidate can raise $3,300 for your primary and $3,300 for your general. So a total of 6,600. So you as a US resident or citizen can give up to $6,600 to any congressional candidate. Now, the problem is if you want to give more, because of Citizens United, we are now able to create something called a PAC, where individuals or corporations or businesses can give money into the PAC. And the PAC is sort of a loophole where it says we promote really good candidates that want to fight for Gen Z, for example, right? Oh,
Hmm.
sorry. That would like to fight for Gen Z, for example.
Yeah.
And because of that, they're able to use their funds to put political ads that are pro Sabrina because Sabrina is a Gen Zer. So what we see happening is that's applicable to all different kinds of races, and it's allowed millionaires, billionaires, corporations put funding into different races based on the person. And so for my congressional race specifically with my primary was we had to really figure out how to raise the money and not take money from billionaires, millionaires, corporations, because you also don't want them to control you. That's the other part, right?
Hmm.
A lot of backdoor deals that happen where it's like, I will give you 25 grand if you vote yes on this bill every time it's brought to the Congress. I will give you $100,000 if you make healthcare your number one priority for making sure, Medicare for all does not pass, even though you're a Democrat. We saw that a lot, not just in my election, but if you think, I tell everyone the perfect example of Citizens United taking place is AIPAC and funding that was pro-Israel around the Palestinian issue and how they were able to give millions of dollars to candidates that were pro-Israel more than those who were pro-Palestine. And so that didn't really happen in my primary, but as a candidate, you really do have to be careful with the stances you're taking, with the issues you're addressing, with
Hmm.
what you want to do, because someone can, like Elon Musk, can hate what you're saying and drop $300 million into the other candidate's race and try to take you out. And that becomes a huge problem within our system because now your candidates can't truly be themselves and say what they want to say because they're always worried that this group of people can come together and out fund you, right? Out raise you. And so I think for me, what I really had to do was keep my voice, and I did, and I said no a lot of the times, and make sure that like I just did the nitty-gritty of raising grassroots dollars, but also competing against people who were already in the race early, had a huge base of people to donate to, and really try to bring that gap closer and closer, which we were able to towards the end. Um, but yeah, overall, I think Citizens United is a bigger picture and has impacted a lot of our politics and is why we're actually in an oligarchy. Like we are in an oligarchy, like there's no doubting it. And that's because of what happened with the Supreme Court when it came to ending Citizens United or
Right. Yeah,
Citizens.
yeah, exactly. So, yeah, what I know that we say this in the reality of the current Congress and everything, and shout out to Josh Will and Gay Valmont worked really, really hard in Florida. They didn't end up pulling it through, but they worked really, really hard and closed that gap a lot. So shout out to them. But if we could do any like reforms, moderate or to the best, whatever you would think. Like, what would you think would be the best ways to reform campaigns so that it is possible that you don't have to have wealthy friends, wealthy business owner friends, whatnot, to be able to have a sustainable campaign?
We need to end Citizens United. I think that's like the biggest part, right? We need to stop the corporate funding and billionaires and millionaires being able to donate tons of money. Um, in an ideal world, this is very progressive of me, automatic registration. You turn 18 years old and you automatically get registered as a voter. And then the way I would see it is a system where like your supervisor of elections sends you a note and says, "Hey, you are now qualified to register to vote. Here, all we need from you is do you want to be a Democrat, an independent, or a Republican, or a non-party affiliate?" And that's all you have to do. You just got to respond back, send it in, you're registered to vote. I think that is a policy slash legislation we should try to push forward that no one really talks about is like
Mhm.
one of the biggest problems right now is that people don't register to vote. And so we need people to spend money to get people to vote, right? Like, so I think
Okay.
just thinking about that would help the constraints of people like me who don't come from a huge wealthy background or don't have like the millionaire and billionaire connections that I need to raise money still be successful because the higher the voter registration, the higher the people will vote, which means they will have a say in like who wins and who doesn't. I think another part to that question as well, which is a little more like something we all have to work as American citizens on, is figuring out ways to limit how much spending impacts the election, right? Because one of the biggest things I had to deal with is because I'm not raising that $1 million, I have to find a way to talk to voters. And in Florida's market specifically, it is super expensive to do that. I would love to send every Democrat a mail-in of me and what I want to do and who I am and all of that. But that's going to cost me $500,000 because I have to send it to them at least 3 times before they actually read it. And even then, you need to send it like 5 to 7 times to actually make it have an impact on the voter. And so, what we really need to work on is finding a way to create a structure where people are able to hear and learn from their candidates before voting that isn't just based on funding. But it is tough. We're in a capitalistic country, so everything is derived by money. And that's hard for us to like really try and change. But I think the biggest focus is end Citizens United. And then also, how do we really help people register to vote and make it as easy and accessible as possible?
That's really interesting that you said that your first response was to get people automatically registered to vote. I didn't think about that, but if you think about, I mean, other countries like in Europe, they have much stricter campaign finance rules and rules that we used to have about when you can spend money on, advertisements and whatnot. But the other thing that they have is automatic voter registration, and then it's compulsory too in most countries where you get like the day off and whatnot. But yeah, that's like you expand your voter base, and that's interesting. I hadn't thought about it like that.
And some countries will fine you if you don't vote. So
Yeah,
you go vote.
my aunt and uncle lived in Uruguay for a while, and they were across the street from a school, I think, which is a polling place. And so yeah, that's what they said. You got a fine. It wasn't like crazy, but still, it was the idea of the penalty behind the ACA. It's like even if it's just a little something, you do it to avoid it, and you'll be, yeah. Anyway, so we talked about about reforms, and so do you think that with overturning Citizens United, do you think, I mean, again, we all know the world we live in, but do you think that is something that we should do legislatively, or should that be another court decision?
I mean, you would ideally want to do legislation, right? Because that's more long term. And then
Yeah.
also you have Republicans and Democrats having to agree upon it. So it's also a bipartisan issue that gets passed and agreed upon. When it's the courts, then it's something that we can always go back to or we could always change. So I would be on more of like there needs to be legislation on this because it's gotten way out of hand, right? Like we now have Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, spending millions and millions of dollars, threatening people that if they don't go his way or Trump's way, they're going to drop a load of money. And it just, to me, like we need to pass legislation that stops this from continuing because it can get worse, right? He's not the only billionaire, you know?
Yeah.
What's keeping the others away?
Oh, right. Well, and that's in that they had, speaking of, elections that were this week, like the Wisconsin Supreme Court election he donated 26 million himself, at final total from what I heard, including his fun little $1 million, very
Out.
very legally suspect checks that he hung out. That, like, did you hear who they went to, by the way? One was the president of the College Republicans Club at the university in Green Bay, and the other person that won was another Republican operative. So like it's just a Ponzi scheme. It's all just and yeah, it's just very frustrating. So, well, as our last question before we get into our shout out and shutdown segment is, if you could give a piece of advice to a future candidate navigating the current campaign finance system, what would that be?
A great question. I would say one, get in early as soon as possible. Like the earlier you can get into the race, the better. The more it will allow you the opportunity to build the connections, to get to donors. And really, it's the nitty-gritty of grinding every day. You have to do something called call time, where you are calling people for money all day. And you really just have to be able to push through it. And so I always, when people do call me because they're thinking about running themselves, and I tell them, the biggest thing is being ready to grind it out because there are going to be days you don't want to do it and you have to do it. And you just have to keep calling and calling and calling because you will get those surprise little nuggets. I had a day where no one was donating, and I just luckily got on a call with someone who was like super passionate about politics and gave me 5K, right? And so you just have to keep going because you never know who's going to help you raise the money you need to raise. And also just have fun. Like I always say, the hardest part about running for office is that everyone's watching everything you're doing. Everyone's competing and trying to think of the pros and the cons of you. And I enjoyed it because I was having fun while doing it. So while I was doing call time, like I had music on or I was watching TV in the background so that I could feel like I was doing something fun and entertaining rather than like I'm just sitting here at my laptop all day, every day, talking to people. And so that's my recommendation to anyone and everyone.
Perfect. And and just to let you know, that joy of you and your campaign totally came through. Like you guys, your whole team was just so fun and, awesome to work with. And that's part of the reason we endorsed you is like, all the candidates were great, and obviously Democrats. So like we love all of our candidates, but we were very excited to support our first Gen Z lady in the to get into the Congress. So, we'll get there. We got Maxwell, so we'll get a Gen Z in there for sure.
Matter of time. Like
Oh
it's
yeah.
Exactly.
Oh yeah, we'll get another one in there. Oh, Sabrina is so passionate and so fun. I remember one of her campaign stops. We went to a place called Radham Cowboy, and it was really fun because at one point there were, I think, 20 people there, and then it got down to 5 people, and it was a fluctuating crowd, but Sabrina kept the same energy the entire time, and it was great. She treated everyone with the same respect. There was no difference in any person that came there. And again, she was just having fun with it. You saw that. So, yeah, I got to say, this was really, really interesting. I've learned a lot myself. So, I really appreciate it. But let's get to the fun part of this.
Okay.
We're going to get to our shout out or shut down. Laura, would you like to kick us off?
Alrighty. Yes. So I am going to do a shout out again this week, and I am shouting out to the 5051 protests that are happening on across the country on this Saturday, April 5th. There's some happening here in St. Pete. They're happening in Tampa. They're happening in Sarasota. They're happening all over. If you are interested, check out 50, I think it's just 5051.com. You can Google it and, the events will pop up. Obviously to keep everybody safe, you got to go through a couple of steps to sign up and get your locations, but it's going to be so fun. And I'm just really excited to see everybody out and see the momentum of, people wanting to fight back. So that's my shout out this week. How about you, Sabrina? Do you have a shout out?
Yeah, I would love to shout out the people of Wisconsin for defeating Elon Musk's candidate and getting Sarah Crawford to Supreme Court, or not Supreme Court, to their Supreme Court. And so I just want to shout out them and also, I guess, shut down Elon Musk because you lost your Wisconsin election.
Absolutely. Any moment we can take to shut down Elon Musk, we will take it.
Literally.
Oh, yeah. Any chance to embarrass him and get him out of wherever he's going. Oh, I got to shout out Cory Booker, Senator Cory Booker from the great state of New Jersey, standing on that Senate floor for 25 hours and 4 minutes, breaking the record held by Strom Thurmond, who previously had filibustered the Senate to try and block the Civil Rights Act. So to see Cory Booker stand up there and stand up advocating for Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, advocating for middle class and low class Americans, the average American that I am, I got to shout that out because I am very appreciative of him. And if there is a rising star in leadership, it might just be Cory Booker.
Yeah, Cory, I've been a fan of Cory since, his presidential campaigns. And he's another one that you can just feel the joy and the love coming out of him. Like he is truly one of those people that's like a public servant. He's just like, he loves helping people. And yeah.
his cousin is RuPaul, so it's got to run in the family. So
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that.
His biological cousin is RuPaul.
Oh my gosh, that is amazing, Cory Booker lore. Oh my gosh, thank you for sharing that. That is so awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us this week, Sabrina. We're gonna so I'm sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. Well, Sabrina, thanks so much for hanging out with us on this week, and everyone watching, thanks for hanging out with us on For St. Pete's Sake. We hope today's episode was enlightening and entertaining. You've been a real treat, Sabrina, and we appreciate your time so much. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, y'all.
Yes, and please remember to follow us on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and Blue Sky. You can find us at For Saint.Pete's Sake. That's at For Saint.Pete's Sake. 2 S's in a row there. And subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen. We'll be back at you next week with more stories for people doing the hard work and making our community better. Until next time, for St. Pete's sake, keep pushing for change.